Okay, cool. What we are supposed to be doing today. Today, my objective is to show you something about EC2 instance. But before we do that, we need to do a quick recap. Let me do a quick recap. So originally, what is it which we were doing, right? We were creating a pipeline. A pipeline, we were building a small Docker container, which was here in my static site. Here we're using a Docker file, a very simple Docker file, and I had one simple index.html file, which is this one. We were trying to build a Docker container out of it, and then we were pushing it. So we were using Docker build, and here in Docker build, I was using Canico, but you can also use simpler version of it using Docker DIND, Docker and Docker approach. So both works. Canico is, as we discussed, is better approach, faster, more performant, more secure. DIND is neither faster, not secure, and that's the reason Canico wins. Whenever you want to build a Docker container, a Docker image, sorry, then you must use Canico. But for the sake of simplicity, I will also start using this so that it's more intuitive, because that's what you actually originally run on your machine also. Fine, so that's two ways here, and then we had a stage called as deploy to EC2, and that's where we were deploying it to our EC2 instance. And that's where we ended last time, and I gave you this assignment to do on how to connect to an existing EC2 instance and then deploy our application. Now, for the people who already know how to start an EC2 instance, for them, maybe this is something which they could have easily done. But for the people who have no clue on how to start an EC2 instance, I'm going to start with that today, not with very basic stuff, but at least few steps on how you will start your EC2 instance, some basics there, small pieces. And then at the same time, I'm going to introduce a new tool called as Terraform, and how we can use Terraform to initialize a new instance just by running a simple command. Okay, now just a quick check. How many of you have already is aware or used Terraform before? Okay, none of you. Fine. How many of you is aware about this concept called as IAC, called as infrastructure as code?
Yes, sir. I know.
Okay. Okay. Can anyone explain me, or can you explain me what is IAC, infrastructure as code? What is the use case for this?
Sir, I think I used in shape infrastructure as a code.
Okay, fine.
Ruby, we write code in Ruby language and execute the things. It
Okay,
is
but why do we do it? हम क्यों करते हैं? हम करना क्यों है हमको IAC? What is the advantage?
for configuration of any server.
Okay, configuration of any server. Okay. Yes, you're right. The answer is right. But let me elaborate on it more. Okay. But before I do that, let me start with the basic things for the people who don't know how to start a EC2 instance. By the way, is there anyone who is very new to AWS and EC2? And do you know anyone here who has not yet tried creating an EC2 instance in AWS, so that I could save myself from explaining the basics? That's the reason I'm asking. Anyone here who has never done it or want me to show you?
No, sir.
No, sir means you don't know, or no, sir means you want me to tell you?
Sir, we know how to create. Sir.
You know, okay. I'm asking from the people. I haven't done it. Please show it once again. Thanks, Anchal. This is what I want. You guys have to speak up if you don't know, because I will skip. I'm running very fast. I want to run very fast, and if you don't stop me, and I will just keep running. So it's up to you to decide. You have to tell me, okay, Akash, stop, slow down, explain me certain things. Fine. So I'll show you very quickly. AWS is a cloud network. You need to create an account in AWS. First of all, the first thing first is you have to create an account on AWS. And here, when you create an account, you need to provide credit card or debit card. So that is a prerequisite for opening an account in EC2, and you have to have it. Otherwise, you will not be able to do anything here. Then there is a thing called as EC2. It's a managed. By the way, AWS is a collection of something called as managed services. That means it gives you a lot of things in terms of platform as well as infrastructure as well as service. So SaaS, PaaS, and IaaC, it gives you all infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, right? You may have heard these terms, SaaS, IaaS, PaaS, right? So it has a collection of lot of services which it gives you. Why? So that you can focus on the business problem and not the infrastructure problem. So they say, don't try to solve a problem which is already solved. That's a phrase you should always remember. Do not try to reinvent the wheel. Always look for, is there an existing solution for it? If it is, better to buy it or use it than to create it. Because if you get focused on doing that, then you will not be able to focus enough on the actual business problem which your software is solving, right? And one of the very basic thing which EC2 provides, which AWS provides, is EC2. EC2 is elastic compute. And why we need it? It's a server, right? So any software runs on a server. So the easiest way to have a server is go to AWS and have it. Otherwise, you have to go and buy a server from a store, a bare metal server. They will send you a big machine, and you have to keep it running all the time. It has to have internet at all times, right? It has to have a backup, a recovery scenarios you have to put in there. What if your house catch a fire? What you will do, right? All these problems comes with having a on-premise server. This is called these keywords. Remember these keywords, guys. You try to go through them also. Let me write it here so that you know what I'm talking about. SaaS, I talked about, right? Software as a service. So these are something which you guys should go and read about, and then come back if you don't understand, right? And infrastructure as a service, right? And then I also talked about something called as managed services, right? So cloud provides you managed services. Why does it do that? So that you can focus on the real problem, that is software. So now you have to focus on a software, not the other things, not the server and all those things. Okay, EC2. Let me come back to EC2. How will you go and create an EC2 instance, right? So easiest way is from the UI. So AWS console provides you a user interface. You have to go to launch instance. And when you go to launch instance, it does ask you a lot of things, which has different impact, but we'll only go with the basic things for now. Okay, so in the basic things, we need to do few things. Let me show it here. So first thing first, you need to give it a name. Second, you need to give it a AMI, an image ID, Amazon machine ID, right? AMI ID here means what is it which you want to have on the server, because server it's just a machine. It's a machine with motherboard and chips and RAM and CPU. It doesn't have anything of its own. So you need to install something on it. What is it which you need to install first? You first install a OS, operating system. Linux systems are the they're the most used OS on any server. I think more than 90%, 95%, maybe 90%, 95% is maybe too much, but more than, I think, I don't have the stats right, but around 90% of the world's servers runs on Linux. Linux is supposed to be very secure, stable, performant, and primarily that's what usually you use, right? But if I go back, you will get an option for other OS also. So AWS Linux, Amazon has its own Linux distribution called as Amazon Linux, but you can have a machine with Mac OS, you can have a machine with Ubuntu, Windows, Red Hat, and whatnot. Everything you will get from here. But you need to define, you need to tell before you create your EC2 instance, you need to tell what AMI ID you will go and use. Okay, that's what you need. Then you need two very important things. One is VPC, which is the network under which you want this machine to be present. What is VPC? VPC is your, what is VPC? Can anyone tell?
Virtual private cloud.
Okay, so this is a network, right? So if you know any computer system, any digital device has to come under a network. A network is made up of, how to say, subnets, different networks within the network. So in VPC you have to define certain subnets already present there. Okay, and this, because you are working in a cloud, there is no physical network which you can go and create. It's always supposed to be a virtual one. So Amazon declares or claims that if you create a VPC, and you will have full control on that VPC. That means once you create a VPC and you put your machine under that VPC, that means it's not under control of anyone. You can control all the rules in, inside traffic and outside traffic, ingress traffic, egress traffic out of that VPC. You can create multiple networks within it, different subnets. There's a concept of availability zones. I'm not going to deep dive under all of this because it will take eons for us to cover everything. But just for the basics, we have to create a virtual private network, and that is something which is essential before you create an EC2 instance. And all those options you will actually get here also. The last two things which are important, one is T2.micro, that means instance type, how much power you need in this machine. Mostly when you are learning, you always use T2.micro. It's a free tier eligible, 720 hours per month is a free here. So you automatically select it, but you have an option to select much more from here. Okay, key pair login. This is absolutely essential activity which you have to do. Otherwise, you cannot do SSH. However, there are still ways. If you forget this thing, and you still want to connect it, then there are still ways. You go to key pair, generate private key, public key, and then place public key somewhere in the server, private key with you. So all that thing still is available, but why to skip it? Because it's essential for you to connect to your EC2 instance, right? So always create new, or you can use the existing one. I have these many which I already created. So either you select the same key which works for all servers, or create a new KP. By the way, a quick question for everyone. What should I do every time when I go and create a new EC2 instance? What should I do? Should I reuse what I already have, or I should create a new pair every time I create a new instance? What is the right approach?
Reuse.
So we can reuse.
Reuse. Okay. Anyone else?
Sir, I just want to say that by any chance, are you away from mic because your voice is like the.
Oh, can you hear me better?
Now much better, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know. My mic is maybe a bit extended. Anyway, yeah. So what is the right answer?
Yeah, we can reuse.
Reuse. Okay. The right answer is not to reuse. Why? What will happen if I start reusing key? Okay, I gave you the answer. Now I'm asking for the reason. What bad could happen if you reuse the keys? Key pairs, sorry, not
All
keys.
the instances, or maybe if we use the same key for multiple instances, they all will be somewhere connected to each other.
No. Connectivity can be managed by subnets or internal networks or a lot of other things, firewall, this and that. Connected, they still are, right? If I'm creating everything within the same VPC, then they anyway are connected.
Yeah.
No, the thing is, see, this works with a public key, private key cryptography mechanism, right? This is called as public key, private key. Now, if I reuse the same public key and private key, usually, okay, quick question. I have two things. This is my public key, and this is my private key. Where does private key resides and where does public key resides? ये कहाँ रखते हैं और ये कहाँ रखते हैं?
Private key is with us.
Private key with us and public key?
AWS
No, not
means cloud.
AWS. No. What is cloud? कहाँ पे? Okay. Private key is with the client, whoever wishes to access. So SSH key, let's say SSH is the client who is trying to reach the server. SSH client has it. So in our case, हमारे पास होती है, right? We download it and we use it to connect. Public key lives inside EC2, not AWS, not cloud. It resides inside your EC2 instance, inside your server. Okay, so in your server, there is a folder called as SSH, and inside that there is a folder, there is a file called as authorized keys, and that's where your public key lives. So जब आप server अपने client से उस server को reach करते हो, EC2 instance को try to access it, the request comes to that server, EC2 instance पे server पे request आती है, and that server will go and then check if this request has come from an actual authorized user for which I have a public key. And then if the public key which the EC2 instance has can decode it, okay, not decode it, decrypt it with the public key, that means the request is genuine, coming from the right user. Okay, now imagine this public key is shared by many users. So if I go back here, see, these things are important. Okay, if you start making these mistakes, you will make your systems very vulnerable to attacks. Okay, this is a bad security practice to reuse the keys, because if you have one EC2 instance and it also has a public key, and you are using the same key here, right? So imagine you have 50 servers and everywhere using the same key pair, and this private key gets stolen. A hacker steals it. If the hacker steals it, he then have access to all of your EC2 instances, because all of them uses the same key pair. Everyone has the same public key, right? And that's a big problem. So you have to reduce the attack surface, something called as attack surface. Reduce the attack surface. कि अगर एक private key use हो गई, चोरी भी हो गई, right? And only one EC2 instance, if let's say using it, then the hacker will have access to only one EC2 instance and not all. Right? So attack surface automatically reduced just by doing a best practice. A best practice adoption. Just you did that and you reduce the attack surface just like that. Okay, so you also should be aware about what is the best practice to initialize your infrastructure, to configure your infrastructure. Okay, make sense?
Yes, sir.
Don't you say.
सर
Yes.
कहना से
Yes.
सर ये जो प्राइवेट की है, ये हम जो क्रिएट करते हैं वो प्राइवेट की है, राइट?
Yes.
और पब्लिक की तो अभी तक देखी नहीं सर, कहाँ मतलब कैसी?
ओके, मैं दिखाता हूँ. आज मैं पब्लिक की दिखाऊंगा सबको. ओके, let me show public key. Okay, for इसको let me delete it. I think this is important. Let me write here EC2 instance 1 and EC2 instance 2. Okay, but during when you are studying this and तब के लिए ठीक है. While you are learning it, it's okay. For example, I'm giving you this gyan, but I also have reused my private key at two places, same place. Let's say if I have multiple EC2 instances, I am reusing it. Why? Because it gives me ease of use, and I have nothing to lose. My servers have nothing. Even if someone hacks it, big deal. Nothing's there, right? From that logic, it's okay for now. But if you get this into an habit, then in actual infrastructure, you will start doing the same thing, and then you will bring the whole system at risk. Okay, so you should not reuse. That's a takeaway from whatever we're discussing from past 10 minutes. Okay, so create new pair. So when I go and create a new pair, it gives me option what kind of encryption algorithm I want to use. RSA is one of the encryption algorithm. EDE25519 is another one, which is supposed to be more better than RSA. But usually it's okay if you use RSA here, which is fine. It generates a PEM file. So if I go and give a name, I'm giving this weird name here because so that I know that I want to delete it later. For you, you give it a proper name for which you are doing it. Then click on create key pair. And when you do that, it asks you to download something, right? So when I go and download this, it downloads. And if I show you the content, which I think everyone may have seen so far, no, I don't want to use it in the keychain. Open folder and show you the file in a text editor, maybe a new text editor, and then I open it here. Come on. Other. What the hell? Okay, let me open this one. Okay, I've opened it here. Okay, so this is how my private key looks like. Okay, so this is a beginning of the private key and end of the private key. Fine. Let me show you. Okay, let me quickly finish this. So you go here, then there's some network settings. You can create your new VPC. I'm reusing what I already have. You can have different VPCs available. For me, this is the VPC. Then I have I can set up firewalls. Firewall simply mean here that how I control what goes in and what goes out to public or to any other sub network within the VPC. To control that, I have a concept called a security group in AWS, and security groups, you can manage what goes in, what goes out. As simple as that. Firewall means what goes in, what goes out. Okay. And that can be configured by something called as security groups. I can reuse the existing one. I can create a new one. It's up to me what I want to do, right? I already have few here, default, launch wizard 1, 2, whatever. Okay. Or I can go ahead and start with the new one. So if I say allow SSH traffic from, so anywhere I have put here, I can also say only allow from this IP. This makes my system more, my EC2 more secure. If I say anywhere, that means anyone can go and then access it, which is not a good approach, guys. Okay, this is again a best practice. So whenever you are in a right now, it's okay. Whenever you go into a company, into a project, don't do stupid things there. Okay, learn what best practices are. What I'm telling you are one of or very few of them, but there are also good best practices, list of best practices, which maybe I can Google and send it to you. But try to make your system more restrictive, something called as principle of least privilege, right? Try to restrict it as much as possible. It gives you a problem, maybe यहाँ से नहीं चलेगा, वहाँ से नहीं चलेगा. It is better. It is in this rules apply in the real setup. Learning wise, it's all okay for now. Okay, and then you have to provide some hard disk. कितनी hard disk देनी है उसको? That's what you will provide here, and then you simply say launch instance. I'm not going to do that, but then because then I have to stop it. But for now, this is how you will go and simply click on launch instance, and it will create instance which would look something like this. Okay, so let me quickly open this instance. Let me say start instance. So I'm now starting. You can start and stop. One thing to be aware, if you are really new to it, don't let your EC2 instance run all the time because it may consume money, which is a problem. So always go for t2.micro instances, which has low configuration. And whenever your work is done, you go and stop it. Don't delete it, because if you delete, you have to recreate it. Whatever installation you may have done on that EC2 machine will go away. So don't delete it. You can say stop. Okay, now since I have started this, how will I connect it, right? So I have to go and see how will I connect it. I go and do a right click and say connect. That's one way of connecting it. So this is how I think most of you have been using it. You simply go to browser, you say connect, and then you connect it. When you do this, at that time, you do not really need to have any SSH key, because AWS within itself does something internally, because it has the private key which you generated, and it can just directly go and connect it. Okay. So that's one way of connecting to it, and it will give you the shell of it here, and then you can say run docker ps and docker commands and whatever it is. You can do all the things from here. Okay. Now, 1 minute, I have something in the chat. Public key is used to encrypt data and private key used to decrypt data. Okay. It does more things, but fine, not entirely wrong statement, partially true. But it can do more things as well. Anyway, I will talk about it later. Let me quickly show you something. Okay, so uh, 1 minute. Okay, come on. Okay, so I will say this. Why I'm typing this double? Okay, when I say list, I get a folder called as .ssh, right? When you go inside this SSH folder and you say li and this again, you will get a file called as authorized keys, right? And when you cat this, you get something like this. Okay, and this is the public key. So there are two public keys right now here. One is this, second is this. Okay, so the thing is, you can configure different keys and you place it here, so that if you try to connect to this machine using a private key corresponding to that specific public key, it will go and check the connection which it has just received. Is it genuine? It will check its integrity, its confidentiality, and everything, whether it's encrypted, communication is encrypted. If it finds yes, if that specific any of these public key can decode it, sorry, I'm using the wrong word again, decoding is different than decryption. It can decrypt it. That means it's coming from the right source, a holder of the private key, and then it will start the communication. So I don't know who asked this question. This is where the public key is. So if you don't know where the public key, if you didn't know where the public key is, now you know. So if you go here, do a ls l and a, then you will see .ssh folder. And then if you go inside .ssh folder, okay, and if you see authorized keys, that's where you will find your key to be present.
Sir, I want to ask a question.
Yes.
Private key used to access the EC2 instance.
Yes.
Then why public key is used?
Okay, so this is a cryptography, public-private key cryptography mechanism. Okay, this is a cryptography, special type of cryptography, where you have two keys, private and public, and private key is used to, encrypt something, and then public key is used to decrypt something. It's your private key is not a password. Password is what? If you given me password, then I'm giving you access to that specific stuff, right? So far, I think your understanding was that private key is password. Private key is not a password. Private key is a key which is only known to you to decrypt a message, and public key is the only key which can decrypt the message encrypted by the private key. So if you want to know more about it, there is a hell lot of documentation available over internet. I will send you some links, but it's a cryptography. It's a different field basically. Or maybe I can quickly show you private public key cryptography. It's called as asymmetric cryptography. Asymmetric cryptography. Okay, so this is a small diagram. Huh? Content, encryption, public, decryption, secret key. Okay, here we are doing the reverse thing because we are accessing a server. So we are encrypting with the private key and decrypting it with the public key. Okay, so this is called as asymmetric encryption, and there's another thing called as symmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption. In symmetric encryption, you have only one secret key. So you encrypt and decrypt based on same secret key. But इसमें challenge क्या है बताओ? Can anyone tell me why asymmetric encryption may not be a good option or is not better than asymmetric encryption? मैंने दोनों के example दिखाए.
Hacking is easy in a symmetric.
Tracking is easy.
Hacking
is easy. Why hacking is easy?
Sir, because only one key is there. If the key is hacked, then it is easy to hack all the system.
तो यार वो तो private में भी हो गया ना. Once you have the private key, you know what public key is. You know why I was showing you that here, because everyone is aware. Everyone can know public key. मैंने दिखा दिया, रिकॉर्ड कर दिया, आप किसी कोई और देख भी लेगा इसको. इफ समवन वॉचेस दिस वीडियो एंड ही गेट होल्ड्स ऑफ पब्लिक की, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. पब्लिक की इज नोन, पब्लिक की कैन बी नोन टू एनीवन. Okay, so the problem why asymmetric, I don't know, I know I'm digressing a lot, otherwise we can go in many directions. I will just quickly wrap this up. Asymmetric encryption, the advantage is that you don't have to worry about distributing the key, right? Now imagine this is A and this is B, this is you and this is me, for example, and we decide on a secret key. भाई ये secret key है जो हम दोनों use करेंगे. We will use this secret key. How will you pass it to you then? कैसे लिख के दूं मैं? अब मैं अगर आप दूसरे लोकेशन में बैठे हुए हो, so I will have to go to internet and send it to you. The moment I pass something in the internet, it can be leaked. Anyone gets hold of secret key, then they can do a lot of attacks, man in the middle attack and this attack and denial of service attack. So different types of attacks are possible. Primarily man in the middle attack. The moment I get secret key, I will snoop inside the network and then start communicating with you, and you would know, you would feel that I am talking to you, but it's someone else, right? So मैं distribution कैसे करूंगा? मैं आपको key दूंगा कैसे? That's the big problem with symmetric encryption. हाँ, अगर आप मेरे आसपास कहीं बैठे हो तो मैं आपको पर्ची पे लिख के दे सकता हूँ, then you copy it from there and use it. Fine, that can be one of the way, and that's the only cases where symmetric encryption is used. Still is being used a lot, but in a more of a secured networks. But when it comes to the public access of things, the problem is secret key. The problem with secret key is how will you distribute? वो दोगे कैसे एक दूसरे को, right? That's where the problem rests. To solve this problem, long back, the visionaries of digital world, they created this concept called as public key, private key, and they say you don't have to distribute the private key, right? So this is how it works. So you don't have to distribute the private key. You say you generate the key, private key, public key, and then give public key to the whole world. Doesn't matter. Public key अगर आपने किसी को इंटरनेट पे भेज भी दिया, doesn't matter. अगर किसी ने उसको ले भी लिया, doesn't matter. Okay. And it can save you from the distribution aspects of the key, and there are a lot of things around this. Okay, I'm just giving you a gist of things, but there is a hell lot of things. What it prevents, how it prevents. You encrypt with public key and then decrypt with private key. You encrypt with private key and decrypt with public key. So a lot of things, different kinds of communication patterns you can handle here. For us, what we are doing in SSH, what we do is the server holds the public key and private key is with you. Okay, that's the use case we use for asymmetric key cryptography. Fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, काफी बोल दिया मैंने इस टॉपिक पे. Let me quickly okay, मैं यहाँ लगा भी देता हूँ so that you know that you have to read these things. I will send a screenshot later. Okay, so public key, private key, fine. That's how you create an instance. That's how you connect it. Okay, now let me quickly go and connect from my machine, because one way of that you connect it from here. Second way of connecting to this server is from command line. So I will open my terminal. Okay, my terminal is here. I will say clear. And here I will try to connect. How will I connect it? Originally I was connecting like this, EC2, that's what you may have seen, but this is a shortcut which I have configured. So you don't worry about it. Let me show you the original way. So I will say, okay, so if you see, I have a key here, my static site key pair, जो मैंने download की थी internet से, जो मैंने अभी दिखाई भी थोड़ी देर पहले, पर वो दूसरी थी. But I have also demonstrated this key. This is a private key. I'm going to delete it. I'm not be using it. So even though someone sees this video, it doesn't matter because this key is not going to be there anyway later on. But my original key which I want to access, I will not show, because then if someone gets hold of it, my servers are compromised. So I will not do that. But the private key would look like this. Okay, so that's what I have it here. My static site key pair.serve. How will I go and connect to server? Very easy. I will say SSH. I will say -I, means I want to give some input or identity. Then here I will say my static site key. Can I make it a bit bigger? I forgot the shortcut again. Smaller, bigger. Okay. Plus. Oh, not here. Sorry. Okay, I make it bigger. Okay. So I will say clear, and I will say SSH-I, then my static site, and then I'll say EC2 user. EC2 user is EC2-user, and then at the rate, I have to mention which user I want to log in with, and then I have to mention the server name, and server name every time you restart, the server name changes, host changes every time you stop and run again. Okay, and then I say like this, and that's it. Here it asks you whether this host, you trust this host, blah, blah. I say yes. And then it has added this into a known host and it has logged me in. So if I can do the same thing from here, LA, and this is the SSH thing, then I can do a CD here, and then I can do again a list here. This is my author. This is exactly what I was showing you earlier. So what I'm trying to show is that I have access to this server now. Okay, so that's how you connect. That's how you spin up an EC2 instance. That's how you connect to it using SSH, using private public key configurations. That's the best way to do to connect to an EC2 instance, and that's exactly what we also have been using for deployment. That's not the ideal way of doing it, but we are stuck with doing that because we are learning right now how to deploy. So when we say we're deploying it, we're using exactly this. You see SSH-v, this, and then run command. Why we have to do all this thing here is because, okay, if I say exit, okay, you remember when I said this, it did ask me something. Right now it won't ask me because it already has asked before. So it is asking for this. I don't want this to be, and then someone manually has to do yes. And that's why I have to mention here strict host key checking, no. And then I also have to connect this, I have to pass an identity. Yeah. What the hell? Okay, I had done this here. You see, I have to pass the key here, which I'm not doing here. And instead of doing that -I thing, I'm using an internal utility of SSH, which is SSH agent. And in SSH agent, I'm storing my private key, and I'm adding it like this, SSH add, and then once it does, SSH first goes to SSH agent to see if there is any private key. If it finds it, which it would, then it will start the communication. So covered pretty much basic here. Any questions so far on why we are doing this, etc., etc.? Okay, if not, then let me
सर ये
show you.
अभी
Yes, go on.
सर ये अभी समझाया जो थोड़ा समझ नहीं आया, ये जो
क्या?
आपने कोड, तो
What
अभी जो
exactly?
जस्ट समझाया आपने।
SSH?
हाँ सर, वो वहां तक आपका समझ आ गया, लेकिन उसके बाद आपने क्या किया थोड़ा वो।
SSH? कुछ नहीं, I was just explaining you what this command is. You when you run the SSH from here, you don't want to pass -i and name of the private key, which you were doing here earlier. You were doing this thing, right? When you are connecting it from local, you have to do -i, my static site keeper, sir. But when you
ओके
do it from here, you don't want to do it because then you have to store it as a file somewhere, which is a problem. So I'm not doing that. I'm using something else. I'm saying I'll use SSH agent and
सर, ये
and
हम क्या कर रहे हैं, किससे ऐड कर रहे हैं, ये मतलब ये समझ नहीं पा रहा हूँ सर थोड़ा।
okay, SSH agent is a utility which comes with an open SSH client, and this has a lot of features. It's a cache sort of thing. It can store data. So SSH has
हाँ
internally built in to check SSH agent for any private key.
सर, जैसे SSH-i हम टर्मिनल को हमारे सर्वर से जोड़ने के लिए मतलब लिंक करने के लिए करते हैं, तो ये हम किससे लिंक कर रहे हैं, ये थोड़ा प्रॉब्लम है।
-i से आप बताते हो कि आपकी
हाँ
की क्या है, right?
हाँ,
पर are you doing it here? Do you see it here,
वो
-i?
हम सर्वर से हम सर्वर पे जाने के लिए करते हैं, -i
हाँ,
वाला। ये हम कहाँ क्या कर रहे हैं।
सर्वर पे कमांड रन करने के लिए, right? So we connect it and then run the command.
अच्छा, ये कमांड रन करने के लिए, तो सर ये
Yes, sir.
कमांड करेगी क्या, व्हाट इज
Docker?
द वर्क।
Yeah.
ये कंटेनर रन करेगी।
Yes.
अच्छा,
That's how.
उस सर्वर पे कंटेनर रन करने के लिए हम ये कमांड चला रहे हैं।
Yes, yes.
ओके सर, ओके।
Right. So before you run, you can run container on any machine. You have to first connect to it, right? So पहले मैंने connect किया. I connected via SSH and then ran the command.
ओके, अंडरस्टूड सर।
So this is what we are trying to do here. Okay. In SSH, there is a way by which you can run the command in the same step where you are also configuring it or also connecting it. So यहाँ के बाद में directly अगर इसके just बाद if I copy this and if I अरे यार तो अंदर ही है, sorry. If I copy this and then say Docker version, something like this, अरे यार. If I say Docker version and do this, then it will connect as well as it will run the command. So see, इसने connect भी किया और जो मैंने double quotes में quotation दिया वो उसने run भी किया. It ran this on the server and returned back. Okay, got it? Fine. Let's quickly move to the next step. Next step is how you can provision this automatically. And that's where this concept of infrastructure as code comes in. Let me introduce that quickly. Now there can be a lot of things which you don't know there, and whatever I'm telling you is something which is a concept about IAC. If you're not able to understand it fully, have patience. You have to go and read about it. I already gave you some list of things for you guys to pre-read. I'm not sure how many of you have done that actually, but Terraform is something which is what you were supposed to read. But if you haven't done that for whatever reason, it's okay. I'll try to cover basics as much as possible. But once you are done with today's session, try to go back and read about it. Okay, enough said. I'll go back here and show you something simpler. Okay, let me bring my stale windows outside of the view so that doesn't bother us. Okay. Okay. I'll show you the full-fledged example and then I'll talk about the basics. Okay, I have a file called as main.tf. Okay, and here I have something written. What I have written here that we'll talk about in a while. Okay, but let's see what it does. I have a file called as main.tf. There are other files which you're seeing here. don't worry, this is not something which I have created. I have only created just one file, which is main.tf. Main.tf means here it's a file which has extension .tf. That means it's a Terraform file, right? So it's a Terraform file, and this Terraform file is I'm thinking of recording it in a separate video, so that you know where Terraform is starting. Let me stop this.